Hey everybody, Gatsby here. This is not my first video showing off this app, but it is the first video with its official new name. BRAINMESS is a word that my friend Kristen used to say all the time, generally talking about, like the things that have you a little clustered or confused, and it sort of over time came to be how I described whatever the hell was wrong with me before I got my ADHD diagnosis, because I knew something was up after COVID happened and I started working from home and realized without somebody constantly looming over me, I had a really hard time self-motivating and keeping disciplined. So I found out I had ADHD and I started medicating myself, and I started doing different things to keep my thoughts organized. During that time, I sort of started playing out with different tools, things like mind mapping tools like Miro, or, like sort of wiki style tools like Notion. And then here recently, with the advent of like AI assisted tools, I played around with Saner and Cascade. But ultimately, all of them I found a little bit lacking in different ways. And one of the things that I wanted to do in order to build a portfolio of my skills and abilities was to try to make one of my own. I don't necessarily think that this would be any better than the ones created by teams of people with professional experience and formal education. It's just something I want to do to demonstrate my abilities and to hopefully find a better job. So what this is meant to be ultimately is an AI-assisted personal knowledge management system. But I started with the groundwork of it being more of a mind mapping tool. So that's the note-based system that you're seeing on the grid canvas, with the different connector lines and things like that. But one thing that this does that a lot of other tools don't is every note is both a file and a folder. You can drag any note into any other note and it will become nested within that note in a sort of like scaffolded, indented index type thing. And you can also do that from within the actual note editor itself, and then later drag those notes out if you choose to. That's something that just made a lot of sense to me in terms of like, as I go along, sometimes I'll decide I want to organize something differently than the way I had already written it, and instead of having to retype it, just being able to grab the sentence and move it to where I want it. I also have the ability to change the color of the notes, and that will persist across the different scaffolding, so if you don't want it to look as silly as it does, just don't change the colors. I have also considered allowing the user to have a different default set color. Right now it's set to yellow because, that is sort of the stereotypical sticky note color. But I do have an option for a neutral tone that changes between light mode and dark mode, and the app does currently have a dark mode to it. Part of the reason I went ahead and started working on this for myself, not just for managing my own thoughts, was, as I mentioned, for it to be a sort of portfolio piece. Those of you who are already subscribed to the channel know that my previous attempt at that was to create a game called Holofoil, and I think that anybody with half a brain might have recognized that that was a little bit too ambitious of a project to create just as a portfolio piece, because I actually give a crap about Holofoil now and really want it to be good, and that's getting in the way of getting anything done in a way that I can go ahead and start showing it off. I have become hyper fixated on the quality of it, and so I have taken a break to make something that is a little bit more practical, that I can sort of crank out, show off what I can do. And I am not of any illusion that I have any real scripting skill. I don't. While I have learned over the past couple of years by practicing on these things with the assistance of stuff like ChatGPT, I do understand that I am getting assistance. I don't really like the term vibe coding because it just sounds so awful. It sounds like the kind of stuff that you'd hear from like NFT bros, and I don't want to be that kind of person. I know that the fans of my previous channel probably already think that of me because of how much I tried to use AI art in my content. I've learned a lot from that, and realistically, I'm just looking at this as an opportunity to practice a new skill and learn a new skill. You'll see here that I have a lot of experience doing a lot of very unique things, but ultimately, I have no formal education in those things. So that's why AI-assisted tools are of particular interest to me. because as somebody without the formal education in coding and without the brain power to really research those things appropriately, I like having an assistant that speaks to me in plain language, especially when I don't exactly know what to Google. So that's part of why I included the AI agents as a function of this app. Basically, in addition to the notes, you can also add AI agents, which you can hook in to your different notes as context, and you can ask the agents questions about your notes. Instead of having to fish through your notes, instead of having to honestly close read your notes, because if you are anything like me and you become overwhelmed by your responsibilities, it can become very daunting to have to fish through your notes for a particular piece of information. And so I like able to have something that is more sophisticated than just a normal search, and instead is able to synthesize a sort of higher level thinking answer from the context of your notes. It's not perfect yet. I just really wanted to make sure it was working in any way. And right now, those AI agents can get context either by the connector lines or by the lasso mode, which creates that sort of area effect you just saw a second ago. You've already seen that you can create different notes. Those notes, instead of having headers and body content sections, only have body content. Now, it looks like it's got a header because every note automatically creates a placeholder child note, but every line of text is a separate note so that every individual piece can have its own checkbox, it can have its own tags, which doesn't exactly work the way I want it to just yet. You have to have saved the note first for you to be able to assign tags to a child note. But in any case, I've got that. I've got the connecting lines to show relationship, which also exists in other, honestly, more fully developed apps like Miro. And I also have a side index. That's actually something I haven't seen in stuff like Miro, and if it exists, I just didn't know. Whereas you can actually interact with your entire library of notes from that one flattened list. Also, like I said, I added the AI agent system. Now that is an idea that I got from a, again, much more sophisticated tool called Neurite. The thing about Neurite is that it is a very complex tool, and honestly, it feels a little overwhelming to me when I've tried to use it in the past. But Neurite lets you make AI agents and hook them together with the connecting lines and create sort of like pipelines of automation. And I really like that, but I wanted to make something a little bit more user-friendly for myself, even if I never were to release this to other people. Now, eventually, I want to be able to sort of chain those AI agents together in order to have predetermined pipelines for what you want to use the app for. Things like if you want to quickly add a note that is just you talking to your assistant saying, hey, I need to get milk. Maybe you already have a section of your notes that is dedicated to groceries, and maybe you already have an assistant that is sitting in that section whose job it is to go ahead and plan for purchasing those groceries in different ways. I think that ideally you could have a pipeline that would go ahead and put that note where it belonged and would trigger the AI agent to begin planning around what you're going to have to do. Maybe they already start building a plan for what dinner is going to be based on what you've already got in your inventory of groceries. Or maybe it's something less practical. Maybe you want to use this tool for Dungeons and Dragons and just keep better track of your lore and your ongoing mysteries. I've used tools like this before to create sort of a Pepe Sylvia like conspiracy map, and I want this to be something you can use for that as well, but to also have an assistant looped in so that you can ask something to the effect of, what is something that Buck might be running from right now? And it could go through all the notes related to Buck, and it would feed back all of the different encounters Buck's had that have turned out to be hostile, remind me of who his enemies might be. And I think that that's a very ambitious idea, but I don't think it's entirely unrealistic, especially with the tag system. I do want the tags to be something that can be assigned automatically, and right now, whenever you load the app, it checks to see if you have any untagged items. Goes ahead and asks you what those things are. I do eventually want the AI to be able to automatically assign tags based on the context of your other existing notes, and then maybe it could use that to narrow down the context it feeds in for the question. I also have that little box for defining what type of AI assistant each is, so you can give it a different personality or more specific instructions. Right now that's not working super great yet, but it uses a free API via Grok with a Q and not a K. So I think that's part of why, you get what you pay for. Anyway, thank you so much for taking a look at that. If you ever want to play with this, the link is actually in the description below. It's run through Supabase, so I'm not taking your password. Someone far more professional than I am is, and I appreciate your time and support just watching this. There also is a donate button in the app, so if you feel like helping me pay for groceries, I highly encourage you to go ahead. I like to eat and survive. Thanks again.